Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to explore another fascinating airline topic. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and high-stakes battles in the world of modern industry, the race to dominate the skies. For decades, the global commercial aviation market has been completely ruled by just two giants, Boeing from the United States and Airbus from Europe. But now, there's a new challenger rising fast from the east, China's COMAC, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China. China's ambitions aren't small. They're determined to break Boeing and Airbus's near-total duopoly, carve out a massive piece of the market for themselves, and eventually become a leader in building the world's next generation of passenger jets. And with recent breakthroughs, including their brand new C919 narrowbody jet finally entering commercial service, this dream is inching closer to reality. So in this video, we're going to explore how COMAC came about, what makes its aircraft like the C919 such a big deal, the huge challenges they still face, and why this aviation showdown might reshape the entire global airline industry. Buckle up, because this is going to be a fascinating flight through history, politics, and cutting-edge engineering. China's big problem, dependence on foreign planes. Let's start by talking about why China is so determined to build its own passenger jets. China has the world's second-largest aviation market, right behind the United States. In fact, many experts predict it will become the largest by around 2035, with hundreds of millions of passengers flying domestically and internationally each year. But despite this huge demand, almost all the planes flying over China's skies today are built by Airbus or Boeing. This means billions of dollars flow out of China every year to buy or lease foreign aircraft. Worse still, it puts Chinese airlines at the mercy of foreign suppliers. If political tensions rise, spare parts, software updates, or even entire plane deliveries could be delayed or blocked. That's why for decades, Chinese leaders have viewed building their own commercial jets as a strategic priority, every bit as critical as building aircraft carriers or semiconductor factories. It's about economic security, technological prestige, and national pride. How COMAC was born, the national champion. To achieve this dream, China founded COMAC, Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, Ltd., in 2008. Headquartered in Shanghai, COMAC was created with the explicit goal of developing large passenger jets that could compete directly with Boeing's 737s and Airbus's A320s. Unlike private companies in the West, COMAC is heavily backed by the Chinese state. It's funded by large state-owned enterprises, overseen by ministries in Beijing, and can call on virtually unlimited national resources. This gives it a level of political and financial support that Boeing and Airbus, who must answer to private shareholders, simply don't have. But starting from scratch to build a modern airliner is an enormous challenge. A single narrow-body jet like a 737 has millions of parts, from advanced avionics and fly-by-wire systems to high-bypass turbofan engines that are among the most complex machines humans have ever built. And all of it has to meet strict global safety standards overseen by bodies like the FAA and EASA. The first step's ARJ-21 regional jet. Before tackling a direct competitor to the Boeing 737, COMAC started smaller, with the ARJ-21, a regional jet designed to seat about 78 to 90 passengers. Think of it as China's equivalent to the Embraer E-Jets or Bombardier CRJs. The ARJ-21 took its first flight in 2008 and finally entered service with Chengdu Airlines in 2016. After many delays, it's mostly used within China, flying shorter domestic routes. While not a technological marvel by Western standards, it borrows heavily from older McDonnell Douglas MD-80 designs. It was an essential learning platform. Through the ARJ-21, COMAC gained critical experience in aircraft assembly, certification processes, and working with suppliers. Enter the C919, China's Boeing 737 competitor. Then came the real prize, the COMAC C919, a narrow-body jet meant to compete head-to-head with the Boeing 737 MAX and Airbus A320neo families. The C919 is designed to carry 158 to 192 passengers over distances up to 3,500 miles, perfect for the dense routes within China and across Asia. Development began in earnest in 2008. With the first prototype rolling out in 2015, the C919 took its maiden flight in May 2017, soaring above Shanghai to huge national fanfare. Since then, it's undergone a long, rigorous flight testing program. Finally, In December 2022, the C919 received its type certificate from Chinese regulators, and in May 2023, it entered commercial service with China Eastern Airlines. What makes the C919 special? On the surface, the C919 doesn't look radically different from a 737 or a 320. It's a conventional twin-engine narrowbody design with two over-wing engines, a typical T-tail, and winglets. But under the skin, it represents China's most advanced commercial aircraft ever. It uses modern composite materials to save weight, fly-by-wire electronic controls, and next-generation engines, the CFM LEAP 1C. Built by the same joint venture between GE and Safran that powers many 737 MAX and A320neos, the C919 also incorporates avionics from Honeywell and other top global suppliers. In other words, the first generation of the C919 is still heavily reliant on foreign technology, but the long-term plan is clear. With each new version, China hopes to replace more and more foreign systems with homegrown alternatives, gradually achieving true independence. Why the C919 matters for China's economy. If COMAC can pull this off, it would be a massive economic victory. The global market for narrow-body jets over the next 20 years is expected to exceed $2 trillion, with thousands of aircraft needed to replace aging fleets and serve growing markets in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Even capturing 10 to 15% of that market would be a huge win for China. It would keep tens of thousands of high-tech jobs at home, support a vast domestic supply chain, and reduce the country's reliance on Western aerospace giants. The huge challenges ahead: certification and trust, but there are enormous obstacles still in the way. Perhaps the biggest is international certification. Right now, the C919 is certified by the Civil Aviation Administration of China, CAAC, but it still needs approval from global bodies like the FAA in the United States and EASA in Europe if it wants to fly internationally or be purchased by airlines outside China. Getting that approval is incredibly tough. It requires rigorous testing data, transparent safety records, and often years of scrutiny. Boeing and Airbus have spent decades building trust with regulators and airlines. COMAC still has to prove it can meet the same standards, especially in a world where geopolitical tensions can easily spill over into trade restrictions. Another hurdle: engine technology. There's also the question of engines. Right now, the C919 relies on the CFM LEAP 1C, a Western engine. If future trade restrictions ever cut off these supplies, COMAC would be in serious trouble. That's why China is pouring billions into developing its own large commercial jet engine, the CJ1000A, meant to eventually replace the LEAP on the C919. But building a reliable high-bypass turbofan that can last 25,000 flight hours between overhauls is one of the hardest engineering challenges in the world. Even Russia's new PD-14 engine for the MC-21 took decades to reach a comparable level, and still faces teething problems. COMAC's bigger dream, the CR929 widebody jet. Not content to stop at narrow-body jets, COMAC has partnered with Russia's United Aircraft Corporation on a widebody project called the CR929. This twin-aisle jet is designed to carry up to 280 passengers on flights over 7,000 miles, directly taking on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and Airbus A350. But this project has hit delays and tensions, especially after Russia's invasion of Ukraine complicated international cooperation. Still, it signals China's ultimate ambition to compete across the entire range of commercial aircraft, from small regional jets to the largest long-haul airliners. Why the world is watching so closely? So why does this all matter so much to the global aviation industry? Because if COMAC succeeds, it could shatter a duopoly that's lasted for decades. Boeing and Airbus would have to compete not just with each other, but with a heavily state-supported Chinese giant that's willing to operate on thinner margins just to capture market share. It also has huge strategic implications. Countries that feel politically aligned with China or that worry about Western sanctions might choose COMAC aircraft over Boeing or Airbus jets. This could gradually reshape global airline supply chains, financing, and even maintenance ecosystems. What airlines think? A mixed picture. For now, most airlines outside China are cautious. They want to see several years of reliable service from the C919 before placing big orders. Questions remain about long-term support, parts availability, and resale value. Leasing companies are also watching carefully, since an aircraft's value on the second-hand market is a huge factor in financial decisions. Inside China, though, there's strong political encouragement to buy COMAC jets. Major Chinese airlines have already placed orders for hundreds of C919s, and local governments are offering subsidies to help build up the COMAC fleet. Looking ahead, the next decade. So what does the future hold? Over the next decade, we're likely to see hundreds of C919s delivered across China, gradually taking over routes currently flown by 737s and A320s, as COMAC gains operational experience, fixes any early issues, and eventually rolls out upgraded models with more Chinese-made components. It could start aggressively marketing these jets overseas. If the CR929 widebody project gets back on track, China could by the 2030s be offering a full range of passenger jets. Combined with its enormous domestic market, this might finally establish China as the third major pillar of the global commercial aviation industry. The high-stakes race for the skies. So there you have it, the incredible story of how China's COMAC is racing to join, and maybe even someday rival, the Boeing Airbus duopoly. It's a story about national ambition, about engineering on a mind-blowing scale, and about how the future of air travel might be decided not just by market forces, but by geopolitics and national pride. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of aviation giants, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more stories about cutting-edge technology and mega projects, and drop a comment below telling us, would you feel confident flying on a COMAC jet today, or would you wait until it's proven itself for a few more years? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video with more incredible stories from the skies and beyond.